Marcus Chen pressed his face against the reinforced viewport, watching the massive prison station grow larger as their transport approached. The Zarion detention complex floated in the void like a mechanical spider, its 8 arms extending into space, each one housing the galaxy's most dangerous criminals. "First time seeing the complex?" asked Captain Yalara, her scaled blue skin catching the light from the nearby star. The Valerian officer had been assigned as his escort, though Marcus suspected it was more about keeping an eye on him than helping. "Yeah," Marcus replied, still staring at the structure. "Hard to believe they built something this big just for prisoners." Yalara's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "When you house creatures that could destroy entire planets, you need adequate space. The beings in there are not like your human criminals, Marcus Chen. These are monsters that have terrorized the galaxy for millennia." Marcus nodded, though something about her tone bothered him. He had volunteered for the prisoner rehabilitation program, one of the first humans to do so. The Galactic Council had been hesitant to accept human participation, claiming humans were too emotional and unpredictable. It had taken months of negotiations and psychological evaluations before they agreed to let him work with lower-risk inmates. The docking procedure took another hour. Marcus watched as automated systems guided their ship into one of the smaller bays. Through the viewport, he could see other vessels, some bringing supplies, others transporting prisoners or officials. The scale of the operation was staggering. "Remember," Yalara said as they prepared to disembark, "you are here on trial. One mistake, one breach of protocol, and not only will you be removed, but it will likely end any future human participation in galactic correctional systems." "I understand the stakes," Marcus replied, checking his equipment bag one final time. Inside were basic medical supplies, some Earth books translated into galactic standard, and a few other items approved for prisoner interaction. The interior of the station was as imposing as its exterior. Corridors stretched endlessly in multiple directions, their walls lined with a material that seemed to absorb light. The air recycling system hummed constantly, processing atmosphere for dozens of different species. Marcus noticed several other rehabilitation workers moving through the halls, but none acknowledged him. Word traveled fast in a place like this. "Your assignment is in Section C7, Yalara explained as they walked. "Lower security inmates, mostly those convicted of property crimes or minor violence. Nothing you cannot handle, assuming you follow procedures." They passed through multiple security checkpoints, each one scanning them thoroughly. Marcus saw guards of various species. Some humanoid, others decidedly not. All carried weapons he didn't recognize, though their purpose was clear enough. "Tell me about the prisoners in my section," Marcus said. Yalara consulted a data pad. 17 inmates total. Mix of species, mostly serving sentences between 5 and 50 standard years. Property theft, illegal modification of spacecraft, assault charges, standard criminal behavior. They reached Section C7, and Yalara paused at the entrance. "There is one thing I should mention. Your section borders on a restricted area. Section D is off-limits to rehabilitation workers. The inmates there are different." "Different how?" "Let us just say they are beyond rehabilitation. Some have been here for centuries. Others are too dangerous even for interaction with guards." Yalara's voice carried a weight that made Marcus uncomfortable. "You will hear them sometimes. Do not let curiosity overcome your judgment." The orientation took the rest of the day. Marcus learned the station's layout, emergency procedures, and prisoner interaction protocols. By the time he reached his assigned quarters, his head was spinning with information. His room was small but functional, with basic furniture and a viewport showing deep space. He unpacked his belongings, setting up the few personal items he had been allowed to bring: a photo of his family back on Earth, a small plant in a containment unit, and his grandfather's old watch. Simple things that reminded him of home. Sleep came fitfully. The station never truly quieted. There were always sounds echoing through the corridors. Most were identifiable: footsteps, machinery, the hum of life support systems. But sometimes Marcus heard something else, something that made his skin crawl. Long, mournful howls that seemed to come from deep within the station's structure. His first week passed without incident. Marcus worked with the prisoners in his section, running basic educational programs and counseling sessions. Most of the inmates were skeptical of him at first. Humans were still new to galactic society, and many saw them as primitive. But Marcus's patience and genuine interest in their stories gradually won over several of them. Kelrix, a insectoid Thraxian serving time for cargo theft, became particularly talkative. During their sessions, Marcus learned about Thraxian culture and the economic pressures that had led to Kelrix's crimes. It was exactly the kind of progress the rehabilitation program hoped to achieve. "You are different from other species," Kelrix observed during one session, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "Others see us as problems to solve. You see us as people to understand." "Everyone has a story," Marcus replied. "Everyone has reasons for their choices, even if those choices were wrong." It was true, but Marcus was beginning to understand that not everyone shared this perspective. The guards treated the prisoners as dangerous objects to be contained. Other rehabilitation workers maintained strict professional distance. Only Marcus seemed interested in actual conversation and connection. The howling continued at night, sometimes lasting for hours. Marcus asked Yalara about it during one of their weekly check-ins. "Just background noise," she said dismissively. "Old ventilation systems, maybe structural settling. Large stations like this always have strange sounds." But Marcus knew the difference between mechanical noise and something alive. Whatever was making those sounds was in pain, and it was definitely biological. 2 weeks into his assignment, Marcus was conducting a session with Vex, a humanoid Kalthari convicted of assault, when the lights flickered. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the common area in red. An announcement echoed through the corridors in multiple languages. "Attention all personnel. Minor containment breach in Section D. All non-essential staff remain in current locations until further notice." The prisoners in Marcus's section became agitated. Several moved away from the walls adjoining Section D, their expressions fearful. Vex, normally aggressive and confrontational, actually moved closer to Marcus. "What's in Section D?" Marcus asked quietly. Vex's large eyes darted toward the sealed door separating the sections. "Things that should have been destroyed instead of caged. The Galactic Council thinks some lives are too valuable to take, even when they belong to killers." "What kind of killers?" "The kind that ate entire worlds," whispered Kelrix, who had overheard. "Section D houses the war criminals from the Void Wars, being so dangerous that even speaking their names is forbidden in most systems." Marcus felt a chill. The Void Wars had ended over 3 centuries ago, but their impact still shaped galactic politics. He knew the basics. A collection of species and entities had attempted to consume or destroy everything in their path. The Allied forces had eventually stopped them, but at enormous cost. The lockdown lasted 6 hours. During that time, Marcus heard new sounds from Section D, not just howling, but crashes, scraping, and what sounded like energy weapons firing. When the all-clear finally came, several guards hurried past his section, their faces grim. That night, Marcus lay awake thinking. Everything about Section D felt wrong. If these were truly war criminals from centuries ago, why were they still alive? The Galactic Council wasn't known for mercy when it came to genocide and planetary destruction. There had to be more to the story. His opportunity came 3 days later. A maintenance issue required temporary rerouting through corridors that bordered Section D more closely than usual. Marcus volunteered to escort a delivery of supplies, claiming he needed to familiarize himself with more of the station. The corridors near Section D were different, darker, more heavily reinforced. The air itself felt heavier, and there was a smell Marcus couldn't identify, something organic and wild. Security cameras tracked their every movement, and Marcus noticed additional defensive measures built into the walls. They passed a series of viewports, each one showing empty corridors within Section D. But as they walked, Marcus caught glimpses of something else. Cells, massive ones, some the size of small buildings. And in one of them, just for a moment, he saw movement. Something large and dark, moving with fluid grace, despite what appeared to be heavy restraints. The image was burned into his mind, glimpses of midnight black fur, eyes that reflected light like silver coins, and chains. Lots of chains. That night, Marcus did research. He accessed the station's database with his rehabilitation worker credentials, looking for any information about Section D. Most files were classified far above his clearance level, but he found references to special containment protocols and eternal imprisonment directives. He also found something else. Historical records showed that one particular prisoner in Section D had been contained for over 400 years. The entry was heavily redacted, but a few details remained. Species, Fenrathi. Crime, planetary assault, mass casualties, resistance to authority. Status, permanently contained. Marcus had never heard of the Fenrathi, but the description troubled him. Resistance to authority seemed like an odd thing to list alongside mass murder. Most of the other entries focused on body counts or destruction caused. This one seemed different. Sleep eluded him again that night. The howling resumed around midnight, but now Marcus listened more carefully. There was a pattern to it, almost like a language. Long calls followed by shorter ones, then silence, then repetition. It wasn't random animal noise. It was communication. Someone was trying to talk. The next morning, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. During his break, he submitted a formal request through the rehabilitation department. He wanted to expand his work to include Section D inmates. The response was swift and absolute. Denied. No explanation given. Marcus wasn't surprised, but he was disappointed. His grandfather had taught him that the most important battles were often the ones everyone else thought were unwinnable. If there was even one being in Section D who might be reached through rehabilitation rather than eternal imprisonment, wasn't it worth trying? He tried a different approach. Research into Galactic Council policies on prisoner treatment revealed several interesting precedents. Rehabilitation workers had the right to observe any prisoner they might potentially work with, provided proper safety measures were in place. It was a loophole, but it might be enough. His second request was more carefully worded. He wasn't asking to work with Section D inmates, he was asking to observe them as part of his research into galaxy-wide rehabilitation techniques. Different species might require different approaches, and understanding the full range of criminal behavior could help improve programs throughout the system. This time, the response took longer. When it finally came, Marcus was surprised. Approved, but with extensive restrictions. He would be allowed one supervised observation session, lasting no more than 1 hour, with full security detail present. He would observe from a safe distance and have no direct interaction with any prisoner. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The observation was scheduled for the following week. Marcus spent the time preparing, reading everything he could find about the Void Wars and the species involved. The Fenrathi were mentioned briefly in a few historical texts, described as a lupine species from the Outer Rim, known for their pack mentality and fierce independence. They had allied with the Void entities not out of malice, but because their home systems had been threatened by expanding galactic governments. It painted a different picture than the simple war criminal label suggested. When the day arrived, Marcus was escorted by no fewer than 8 guards, including Captain Ylara. They traveled through corridors he had never seen, deeper into the station's core. The security measures became increasingly elaborate. Energy barriers, automated defenses, multiple checkpoint scans. "Remember," Yalara warned as they approached the observation deck, "you are here to observe and learn. Do not attempt communication. Do not approach the containment barriers, and do not let your human emotions cloud your judgment about what these beings have done." The observation deck overlooked a massive containment cell through reinforced transparent aluminum. Marcus stepped up to the viewing window and felt his breath catch. The cell was enormous, but it looked small compared to its occupant. The creature within was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, even in a resting position, it was clearly lupine in basic structure, but far more magnificent than any earth wolf. Its fur was so black it seemed to absorb light, and its build suggested both power and grace. But what struck Marcus most were the restraints. Chains covered the creature from neck to hindpaws, made of some metal that glowed faintly with energy. They were attached to points throughout the cell, limiting movement to a small area in the center. The being could stand, sit, and lie down, but little else. As Marcus watched, the creature turned toward the observation window. Its eyes were indeed silver, and they held an intelligence that was unmistakably sentient. For a long moment, being and human studied each other through the barrier. Then the creature did something unexpected. It tilted its massive head slightly and made a sound, not the howl Marcus had been hearing, but something softer, almost questioning. "Incredible," Marcus whispered. "How long has it been contained like this?" 412 years, replied one of the guards, a stocky humanoid Marcus didn't recognize. "Since the end of the Void Wars. It was captured during the Battle of Kepler's Rest. And it's been chained this entire time?" "The Fenrathi are extremely dangerous when unrestrained. This one killed thousands of council troops before capture. The restraints are for everyone's safety." Marcus continued watching. The creature had returned to what appeared to be a meditation pose, sitting with its massive head lowered. But every few minutes, it would look back at the observation window, as if hoping to see something there. "What's its name?" Marcus asked. The guards exchanged glances. "Designation FW7, Yalara answered. "We don't use their actual names." "But it has a name." "It had a name. Names are for people, not for war criminals." Marcus felt something twist in his stomach. Whatever this being had done during the war, it was clearly intelligent and aware. 4 centuries of solitary confinement, barely able to move, with no social contact except guards who saw it as a number rather than a person. As their hour ended and they prepared to leave, Marcus looked back one more time. The creature was watching him again, and this time Marcus was certain he saw something in those silver eyes. Hope. Marcus couldn't sleep after the observation session. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those silver orbs staring back at him with what looked like desperate hope. He had worked with enough prisoners to recognize the signs. This wasn't a mindless killer, but someone who had been broken by centuries of isolation. The next morning brought unexpected news. Director Malveth, a tall Zephyrian with pale green skin and multiple eye stalks, requested a meeting. Marcus had only met the station director once before, during his initial orientation. "Mr. Chen," Malveth said as Marcus entered the spacious office, "I understand you observed one of our Section D inmates yesterday." "Yes, sir, as part of my research into rehabilitation techniques across different species." Malveth's eye stalks moved independently, some focusing on Marcus, while others consulted various displays. "And what did you conclude from this observation?" Marcus chose his words carefully. "I believe further study would be beneficial. The prisoner showed signs of intelligence and awareness that might respond to rehabilitation techniques." "I see." Malveth was quiet for a long moment. "Mr. Chen, What do you know about the Void Wars? Just the basics from historical records. A coalition of species attempted to destroy or consume inhabited worlds. The Galactic Council forces eventually stopped them. The basics, yes. Malveth's tone suggested there was much more to the story. What those records don't fully capture is the nature of the enemy we faced. These weren't simple conquerors seeking territory or resources. They were something far more dangerous. Marcus waited, sensing this was important. The void entities were beings of pure destruction. They consumed entire solar systems, turning them into empty space. Nothing remained. No planets, no stars, no life. Just emptiness. Malveth's voice carried old fear. The species that allied with them did so for various reasons. Some were corrupted, others coerced. A few genuinely believed the void entities offered a better future. And the Fenrathi? The Fenrathi were unique. They didn't ally with the void entities out of corruption or coercion. They did it out of loyalty. Malveth pulled up a holographic display showing star charts. Their home systems were on the edge of expanding Council territory. They had been fighting border wars with Council forces for decades, trying to protect their independence. Marcus studied the display, beginning to understand. So when the void entities offered them a chance to strike back, they saw it as their only hope for survival. The Fenrathi are pack creatures, Mr. Chen. Their loyalty to their own kind is absolute. When the void entities promised to eliminate the Council threat to Fenrathi territory, many packs joined the war. The picture was becoming clearer, and it wasn't the simple good versus evil story Marcus had assumed. What happened to their home worlds? Malveth's eye stalks drooped slightly. Gone. The void entities consumed them just as they did everything else. The Fenrathi realized too late that they had been deceived, but by then they were deep in enemy territory, branded as traitors and war criminals. So they were victims too, in a way. Many of us believe so, but they still participated in attacks that killed billions. The question of their culpability has been debated in council chambers for centuries. Malveth dismissed the hologram. Which brings me to why I wanted to speak with you. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. The prisoner you observed, designation FW7, has been the subject of ongoing discussion among council members. Some believe continued imprisonment serves no purpose beyond punishment. Others worry that release would set a dangerous precedent. Malveth fixed several eyes on Marcus. Your request to study rehabilitation techniques provides an opportunity to gather new data on this matter. You're saying I might be able to work with him? I'm saying the Council is interested in human perspectives on rehabilitation. Your species has a reputation for unconventional approaches to problem solving. If you were to develop a rehabilitation plan for this particular prisoner, it would carry weight in Council discussions. Marcus felt excitement building, but also caution. What would be involved? Direct interaction, under heavy security. Psychological evaluation, progress assessment, development of a reintegration plan. It would be dangerous, and there would be no guarantee of success. Malveth paused. It would also be career-defining for you, one way or another. I'd like to try. I thought you might. Malveth activated a new display showing complex forms and authorization codes. The paperwork will take several days to process. Use that time to prepare. Study everything available about Fenrathi psychology and culture. Learn their language if possible. And Mr. Chen? Yes, sir? Remember that this creature, regardless of his circumstances, was responsible for thousands of deaths. Do not let compassion blind you to reality. The next week was a whirlwind of preparation. Marcus dove into every available resource about Fenrathi culture, psychology, and history. What he learned painted a picture of a complex society built around pack loyalty, honor codes, and deep spiritual connections to nature. The Fenrathi language was particularly challenging. It combined vocal sounds with subtle body language and scent markers that humans couldn't replicate. But Marcus managed to learn basic conversational phrases and key concepts. More importantly, he learned about Fenrathi customs regarding first meetings, respect, and trust building. He also researched the specific prisoner he would be working with. The classified files he now had access to revealed more details about FW7. His real name was Kithara, and he had been a pack leader, roughly equivalent to a military commander, during the war. He had led attacks on 3 Council worlds, resulting in massive casualties before his capture. But Marcus also learned something else. Kithara had surrendered voluntarily after learning that the Void entities had consumed the Fenrathi homeworlds. According to the capture reports, he had ceased fighting and allowed himself to be taken without resistance. His pack had done the same. It suggested someone grappling with the realization that he had been fighting for a lie. The cultural research revealed why this mattered. Fenrathi pack leaders who failed in their duty traditionally took their own lives rather than live with the shame. The fact that Kithara had chosen capture over suicide suggested he still felt some obligation to continue living, perhaps to someday make amends. When the authorization finally came through, Marcus found himself more nervous than he expected. He had worked with dangerous prisoners before, but never one quite like this. Kithara wasn't just physically powerful. He was intelligent, trained in warfare, and had centuries of imprisonment to think about what humans and the Council had done to him. The security briefing took 3 hours. Marcus would enter a specially constructed interaction chamber, separated from Kithara by an energy barrier. The Fenrathi would remain chained, though he would be moved to a position where conversation was possible. Emergency protocols were extensive. Any sign of aggression would result in immediate termination of the session and sedation of the prisoner. "Remember," Captain Yalara said as they approached the interaction chamber, "this being has killed thousands. Do not anthropomorphize its behavior or assume human motivations." "I understand the risks," Marcus replied, though privately he wondered if Yalara understood the risks of treating someone as a monster for so long that it became self-fulfilling. The interaction chamber was smaller than the main containment cell, but still substantial. As Marcus entered his side of the divided space, he could hear movement from the other section. Heavy footsteps, the rattle of chains, and what sounded like careful positioning. When the privacy barrier activated, allowing them to see each other clearly, Marcus felt his breath catch again. Kithara was even more impressive up close, despite the extensive restraints. His black fur seemed to have a subtle pattern in it, visible only in certain light. His silver eyes tracked Marcus's movements with obvious intelligence. For a long moment, neither spoke. Marcus had planned an opening, but actually facing this being, person, left him momentarily speechless. Finally, Kithara spoke. His voice was deep and resonant, but the words were in perfectly clear galactic standard. "You are the human who watches." "Yes. My name is Marcus Chen. I'm here to talk, if you're willing." "To talk." Kithara's head tilted slightly. "I have not talked to anyone in over 100 years. The guards give orders and ask questions, but they do not talk." Marcus felt something twist in his chest. A century of silence except for commands and interrogations. "I'd like to change that if possible." "Why?" It was a simple question, but Marcus sensed it carried enormous weight. "Because I think you might be more than what your file says you are. Because everyone deserves to be heard. Because I think there might be another side to your story." Kithara was quiet for so long that Marcus began to wonder if he had made a mistake. Then the Fenrathi moved slightly, a gesture that Marcus recognized from his cultural research as acknowledgement. "You know our customs." "I've been studying them. I wanted to approach you properly." "Properly?" There was something that might have been amusement in Kithara's voice. I have not been approached properly in 4 centuries. Then I'm honored to be the first in a long time. Another long silence. Then Kithara settled into a more comfortable position, as much as his restraints allowed. What do you wish to know, Marcus Chen? Whatever you're willing to share. Your story, your experiences, your thoughts. I'm here to listen. My story. Kithara's eyes seemed to look past Marcus, into some distant memory. I was born on Fenrathi Prime, the second moon of our home system. My pack controlled the northern territories, where the great ice forests grew. We were hunters, protectors, warriors when needed. Marcus listened as Kithara spoke about his early life. The Fenrathi society he described was complex and beautiful. Multiple packs working together to manage vast territories, each with specific roles and responsibilities. They had been spacefaring for millennia, but remained deeply connected to their natural environments. When the Council ships first came to our systems, we did not see them as enemies, Kithara continued. They spoke of trade, cooperation, joining a greater galactic community. Many packs were excited by the possibilities. What changed? The Council wanted us to abandon our territorial structure, to submit to their administrative systems. They did not understand that our territories were not just land. They were spiritual connections spanning generations. To abandon them would be to cease being Fenrathi. Marcus was beginning to understand the tragedy. 2 incompatible systems of organization, neither willing to truly accommodate the other. When we refused to integrate fully, they sent military forces. They claimed we were being aggressive, that our territorial disputes with neighboring systems made us dangerous. Kithara's voice carried old pain. They began taking our outer worlds, claiming they were necessary for galactic security. So you fought back. For decades, we lost 3 pack worlds, hundreds of ships, thousands of warriors. The Council forces were too numerous, too well supplied. We were slowly losing everything that mattered to us. And then the void entities made contact. Kithara's entire posture shifted, shoulders sagging with what looked like eternal regret. They came to us in our darkest hour. They showed us images of Council worlds, rich, safe, untouched by war. They spoke of justice, of balance, of ending the threat that was destroying us. They offered you a chance to strike back. They offered us survival. Or so we believed. Kithara's eyes focused on Marcus again. Do you know what the void entities truly were, Marcus Chen? I know they consumed solar systems. They were hunger given form. Not evil in any way you might understand, but something far worse. They were emptiness that sought to make everything else empty too, and we, in our desperation, became their tools. The weight of that confession settled between them. Marcus could see the pain in Kithara's eyes, the burden of knowledge that had come too late. What was it like when you realized what you had done? We were attacking a Council agricultural world. 17 billion inhabitants, mostly civilians. The void entities had told us it was a military target, a supply depot feeding the forces attacking our homes. Kithara's voice became very quiet. When we broke through their defenses, we saw the truth. Families, children, farmers who had never seen war. What did you do? I ordered my packs to withdraw, but it was too late. The void entities had already begun their consumption. We could only watch as an entire world became nothing. Kithara's chains rattled as his hands clenched. That was when we learned our homeworlds were already gone, had been gone for months. We were fighting for systems that no longer existed. Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes. The scope of the tragedy was overwhelming. An entire species manipulated into destroying others while their own civilization was quietly consumed. When did you surrender? The moment I learned the truth. My remaining packs and I ceased all hostilities and allowed Council forces to capture us. Many chose death over capture, but I felt I needed to live, to bear witness to what we had done. And you've been here ever since. Yes. Alone. Chained. Forgotten by everyone except guards who see only a war criminal. Kythera looked directly at Marcus. Until you. They talked for the full 2 hours aloud. And Marcus felt like he had barely scratched the surface. Kythera was intelligent, thoughtful, and clearly haunted by his actions during the war. But he was also someone who had been manipulated and deceived, who had lost everything while trying to protect what he loved. As the session ended and Marcus prepared to leave, Kythera spoke again. Marcus Chen, will you return? If you want me to, if they let me. I would like that very much. Walking back through the station corridors, Marcus felt like he was seeing everything differently. The guards, the other prisoners, even the walls themselves seemed like part of a system that was missing something important. Justice and punishment were necessary, but what about redemption? What about healing? That night, Marcus started writing his first report. He knew it would be read by people throughout the council hierarchy, people who would judge not just Kythera's fitness for rehabilitation, but also the value of human perspectives on justice. He wrote about what he had learned, not just about Kythera, but about the circumstances that had led to the Fenrati joining the Void War. He wrote about manipulation, desperation, and the difference between evil and tragedy. Most importantly, he wrote about the being he had met, someone carrying incredible guilt and pain, but also someone who might yet have something to offer the galaxy. The response to his report was swift and polarized. Some council members praised his insights and requested additional sessions. Others accused him of being naive and potentially dangerous, arguing that war criminals should face justice, not therapy. But Director Malveth approved continued sessions with gradually increased freedom and interaction time. It was a chance, perhaps the only chance, to see if 4 centuries of punishment could give way to something resembling hope. Marcus fell asleep that night thinking about silver eyes that had seen too much, and wondering if redemption was possible for someone who had helped destroy worlds while trying to save his own. 3 months into his work with Kythera, Marcus had established a routine that was slowly transforming both of them. Their sessions had expanded to daily conversations lasting up to 4 hours. The interaction chamber had been modified to allow for limited physical interaction. Kythera could now move more freely within his section, though the energy barrier remained. Marcus had learned more about Fenrathi culture than any human before him. Kythera, in turn, had become fascinated by human perspectives on morality, justice, and redemption. Their conversations ranged from philosophy to practical matters, from ancient Fenrathi poetry to human music theory. Your species confuses me, Marcus, Kythera said during one session, settling into his preferred position near the barrier. You have so little experience with interstellar civilization, yet you approach complex problems with solutions no one else considers. Maybe that's because we don't know enough to assume things are impossible, Marcus replied. Fresh perspective can be valuable. Indeed. Today I want to ask you something I have been thinking about. Kythera's expression grew serious. If they released me tomorrow, what would I do? I have no pack, no territory, no purpose. My people are scattered across the galaxy, most still imprisoned or dead. How does one rebuild a life from nothing? It was a question Marcus had been dreading, because he didn't have a good answer. I think you'd have to find a new purpose, something that honored your past while building something better. Like what? Marcus hesitated. Maybe helping other Fenrathi adjust to galactic society, or working to prevent the kind of manipulation that led to the Void War. You have unique insights into how species can be deceived into terrible actions. Kythera was quiet for a long moment. You believe I could do such things? That others would trust someone with my history? I think people would be surprised by what you've learned from your mistakes. That's what rehabilitation is supposed to be about. Not just punishment, but growth. Their conversation was interrupted by an emergency alarm. The lights shifted to red, and automated announcements echoed through the station. Marcus recognized the security protocol from his training. Major containment breach in progress. Captain Yalara's voice crackled over the communication system. All rehabilitation workers report to emergency stations immediately. This is not a drill. Marcus started to leave, but Cathara called him back. Marcus, wait. That alarm pattern, it indicates multiple breaches in different sections. That doesn't happen by accident. What do you mean? Someone is coordinating this from the inside, and if they're targeting multiple sections simultaneously, they're either trying to create chaos or... Cathara's eyes widened. They're trying to reach Section D. Marcus felt cold dread settling in his stomach. You think someone is trying to free the Void War prisoners? Or kill them? There are species in the galaxy who believe we should all have been executed rather than imprisoned. If they've infiltrated the station, the implications were terrifying. Marcus activated his emergency communicator, trying to reach Yalara or Director Malveth, but got only static. The communication system was being jammed. I have to go help with the emergency response, Marcus said, but Cathara's next words stopped him cold. The breach will reach this section within minutes, and when it does, those energy barriers will fail. I will be free for the first time in 4 centuries. Cathara's silver eyes fixed on Marcus with intense focus. What do you think I will do? Marcus realized this was the ultimate test of everything they had built together. If Cathara was truly rehabilitated, he would help deal with the crisis. If not, I think you'll do the right thing, Marcus said quietly. And what if the right thing costs me my life? What if helping means I never get another chance at freedom? Marcus met his gaze steadily. Then you'll still do it, because that's who you are now. The lights flickered, and the energy barrier wavered. In the distance, Marcus could hear the sounds of combat, energy weapons, shouting, the crash of barriers being breached. Then the power failed completely. Emergency lighting activated, casting everything in red shadows. The energy barrier was down. For the first time in over 400 years, nothing stood between Marcus and one of the galaxy's most feared war criminals. Cathara rose slowly to his full height, chains rattling. He looked at his restraints, then at Marcus, then at the door leading to the rest of the station. The restraints have magnetic locks, Cathara said calmly. Without power, they will release in approximately 30 seconds. Marcus's heart was pounding, but he forced himself to remain calm. What are you going to do? I am going to make a choice, Cathara replied. The most important choice of my very long life. The magnetic locks disengaged with a series of metallic clicks. 4 centuries of chains fell away from Cathara's body, hitting the floor with crashes that echoed through the chamber. For the first time since his capture, the Fenrathi was completely free. He stretched slowly, working muscles that hadn't moved freely in longer than most species lived. Then he turned to face Marcus, who was acutely aware that he was trapped in a small chamber with someone who could tear him apart without effort. Instead, Cathara moved to the control panel beside the barrier generator. The manual override will restore barrier function for approximately 10 minutes using backup power, he said, studying the controls. Enough time to get you to safety. What about you? I'm going to help stop whatever is happening on this station. Cathara's voice carried a certainty that hadn't been there before. And then I am going to return to this chamber and allow myself to be restrained again. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do. Because you taught me something, Marcus Chen. Redemption is not about being forgiven. It is about choosing to do better, even when no one is watching. Cathara activated the manual override, and the barrier flickered back to life. But instead of trapping him, it now protected Marcus while allowing Kithara access to the corridor beyond. "Stay here until security arrives," Kithara commanded, then paused at the doorway. "And Marcus? Thank you for seeing me as more than a monster." With that, he vanished into the darkened corridors. Marcus tried to follow the action through the station's security feeds, but most cameras were down. He caught glimpses of combat in various sections, dark figures moving through corridors, and what looked like systematic attempts to reach the highest security areas. Then he saw something that made his blood freeze. A group of armed figures was approaching Section D, heavily equipped and moving with military precision. As they passed under a functioning light, Marcus caught sight of their insignia. The Vanguard of Justice, a radical organization that believed void war criminals should face execution rather than imprisonment. They weren't trying to free the prisoners. They were planning to murder them. 20 minutes passed before Marcus heard footsteps approaching his chamber. He tensed, unsure what to expect, until Captain Yalara's voice called out, "Marcus, are you safe?" The barrier dropped, and Yalara rushed in with a security detail. "We need to evacuate you immediately. The station has been compromised by Vanguard operatives." "Where's Kithara?" "The prisoner? Yalara paused, consulting her datapad with a confused expression. "According to reports, he's been instrumental in stopping the infiltrators. But that can't be right." "It is right. He chose to help." As they made their way through the corridors, Marcus saw evidence of the battle that had taken place. Scorch marks from energy weapons, damaged bulkheads, and several unconscious figures in Vanguard uniforms being tended to by medical teams. "The infiltrators used the maintenance tunnels to bypass most of our security," Yalara explained as they walked. "They had detailed station schematics and access codes. Someone with high-level clearance helped plan this." They reached a main corridor where a crowd had gathered around something Marcus couldn't see. Director Malveth was there, along with several other senior staff members. As Marcus approached, the crowd parted, and he saw what held their attention. Kithara stood in the center of the group, no longer chained, but also not restrained. He held an unconscious Vanguard operative in his arms, someone who was clearly injured but alive. 3 other operatives lay nearby, similarly unconscious but breathing. "He saved them!" whispered one of the guards in amazement. "The Vanguard team made it to Section D and was preparing to execute prisoners. This Fenrathi could have escaped in the chaos, but instead he stopped them. And look, they're alive. He could have killed them easily, but he chose not to." Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes. Kithara had faced the ultimate test and passed it completely. When given the chance for revenge against people who wanted him dead, he had chosen mercy. Director Malveth approached Marcus. "Mr. Chen, I owe you an apology, and perhaps the galaxy owes your species a debt of gratitude." "Sir, your rehabilitation work with this prisoner has accomplished something we thought impossible. In 4 centuries, Kithara has gone from war criminal to someone who risks his life to protect his former enemies." Malveth's eye stalks focused on Kithara. "The Council will want to study this extensively. What does that mean for him?" "I suspect it means a great many things are about to change." The investigation that followed revealed the scope of what had happened. The Vanguard of Justice had infiltrated the station with help from a corrupt council official who believed void war prisoners were too dangerous to be kept alive. Their plan had been to execute all Section D inmates and escape during the resulting chaos. Kithara's intervention had stopped them, but more importantly, it had been witnessed by dozens of station personnel and recorded by security systems. Video of a void war prisoner choosing to protect both guards and other inmates spread rapidly through galactic news networks. The debate that followed consumed council chambers for weeks. Some members argued that Kithara's actions proved the value of rehabilitation over pure punishment. Others worried about setting precedents that might be exploited by truly dangerous criminals. Marcus found himself testifying before multiple council committees, explaining his methods and the changes he had observed in Kythera. More importantly, other species began requesting human rehabilitation workers for their own prison systems. "You have given us a new perspective on justice," Director Malveth told Marcus during one of their debriefings. "Not just punishment or containment, but the possibility of actual redemption. It is very human." The final decision came 3 months after the incident. The Galactic Council voted to establish a new rehabilitation protocol modeled on Marcus's work with Kythera. Selected prisoners would be given the opportunity to earn reduced sentences through demonstrated change and service. Kythera was the first to benefit from the new system. His sentence was commuted to time served, with the understanding that he would work with the Council to help develop better methods for preventing species manipulation and conflict. Marcus was present for Kythera's release ceremony. After more than 4 centuries in chains, the Fenrathi walked free into a galaxy that had changed as much as he had. "What will you do now?" Marcus asked as they stood together in the station's observation deck, looking out at the stars. "I will work to ensure that what happened to my people never happens to others," Kythera replied. "And I will honor the gift you gave me." "What gift?" "The chance to become more than my worst moment." Kythera placed a massive hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Your species understands something that others struggle with. That redemption is always possible for those willing to change." "Not just my species," Marcus corrected. "You proved that yourself." As news of the rehabilitation program spread, requests came in from across the galaxy. Other humans volunteered to work with alien prisoners, bringing their unique perspective on second chances and redemption to species who had never considered such possibilities. Marcus remained at the Zarian complex, now as head of the new rehabilitation department. His office was larger than his old quarters, with windows facing space and walls lined with case files of prisoners working toward redemption. But the most treasured item in his office was a small crystal sculpture that Kythera had made during his first week of freedom. It depicted 2 figures, one human, one Fenrathi, standing together despite vast differences in size and species. The inscription at the base was in both Fenrathi script and Galactic Standard. "Where there is understanding, there is hope." 6 months after Kythera's release, Marcus received a message from Earth. The Human Council wanted him to return home to establish similar rehabilitation programs in human space. It was an honor and an opportunity to spread what he had learned to his own species. But as Marcus prepared for his journey home, he knew the real victory wasn't in the programs or policies that would follow. It was in the simple proof that anyone, no matter what they had done or how far they had fallen, could choose to be better. Even someone who had spent 4 centuries in chains could learn to fly. The galaxy was vast and filled with conflict, but it was also filled with possibility. And sometimes, all it took was one person willing to see beyond the surface, to find the potential for good that existed in the most unexpected places. As Marcus's transport departed the Zarian complex, he looked back one last time at the massive prison station. Somewhere in there, other rehabilitation workers were having their first conversations with prisoners who had been written off as irredeemable. Some would fail, but others would discover what Kythera had learned, that redemption wasn't about erasing the past, but about choosing to build a better future. It was a very human idea. But Marcus suspected it was also a universal truth, waiting to be discovered by anyone brave enough to remove the chains that bound both body and spirit. The stars ahead held infinite possibilities, and for the first time in centuries, some of those possibilities included hope for those who had lost it long ago.